that address our national security in the Department of Defense and across the government, and I'm deeply honored to be by their side as Secretary of the Navy. So, Jim, thank you for that introduction and for assembling this great conference. But let me start by sending my prayers to the brave Ukrainians standing strong in the face of Russian aggression today. As a Cuban refugee myself who fled communism as a young child in the 1960s, I deeply sympathize with their cause and their plight, and I personally know what they're going through. We stand united in our support of the Ukrainian people, and I pray that evil destruction raining down on them by Putin will soon come to an end in a more peaceful and diplomatic manner, as elusive an outcome as that may seem today at this moment in time. Again, thanks for this invitation. It's an honor to be speaking with you here today. I deeply respect this audience, all of you here. You understand how important our military and especially our naval forces are to the defense of our nation and to the protection of our national security interests that directly contribute to the advancement of our economy. I often say that national security equals economic security and vice versa. As some of you know, I spent the first half of my adult life serving the United States Navy in uniform. Then for 17 years, I served our nation, like so many of you here today, as a defense professional from the private sector. I built my own little company with 140 people over 17 years. I'm thankful for the many lessons that I learned from both my naval and private sector service as I now fulfill my new role as your Secretary of the Navy. As I begin today's discussion, let me first share with you why I believe the Navy Marine Corps team is more relevant today than it ever has been. First and foremost, it's the Navy Marine Corps team that protects our nation's commerce. The oceans are indeed the lifeblood of the global economy. $5.4 trillion of annual U.S. commerce and more than 31 million American jobs depend on ocean-going trade. Each year, 11 billion tons of goods traverse the oceans. The over 400 underwater fiber optic cables that crisscross the oceans carry 97% of international communications and over $1 trillion of financial transactions every single day. Without an ever-present Navy Marine Corps team keeping sea lanes of trade and communications safe from malevolent actors, the global economy could easily shudder to a halt. That reality is perhaps nowhere more relevant than in the South China Sea, through which 1/3 of all international shipping passes. Second, a lethal, forward, present, and always dominant Navy Marine Corps team is an essential pillar of our nation's joint warfighting concept. With a clear strategy, ready warfighters, and capable platforms, we can deter any foe and win any conflict. And finally, strong maritime diplomatic engagement is vital to strengthening America's partnerships with our allies, to uphold the rule of law, and deter malevolent behaviors wherever they may exist. I am proud to note that the Biden administration is committed to making the necessary investments to ensure the Navy Marine Corps team remains the world's most capable maritime force. With this administration's strong commitment, as you will see, we will act smartly and forcefully to deter our pacing challenge, namely China. We will also collectively work together with our allies in NATO and around the globe to prevent Russia from sowing even greater chaos. The Navy Marine Corps team understands its mission clearly: to deliver combat-ready forces to our nation and our Commander-in-Chief. Let there be no doubt about this. But it's also important for you and all Americans to understand our mission and our purpose as well, which is why I began with that. We do have a clear strategy to achieve that mission, rooted in 3 guiding principles. First, we must maintain and strengthen our maritime dominance in every domain to deter potential adversaries and, when necessary, to fight and win at sea. Secondly, we must empower our sailors and our Marines by fostering a culture of warfighting excellence in all that we do. And third, we must strengthen our strategic partnerships with our sister services, with industry, and with our international partners around the globe. Strengthening our maritime dominance in defense of our nation and our national security interests is critical and primary. This means we must be able to respond quickly and decisively whenever and wherever required. Secretary Austin has provided us clear guidance for projecting that force where it matters in an integrated manner. Today, 75 ships are deployed around the globe, actively campaigning forward. We also have over 30,000 Marines forward deployed at sea and in over 50 countries. This is far more significant than I've seen in many, many decades. Active naval campaigning, where it matters most, speaks to our readiness and our commitment to train aggressively as warfighters with our allies and partners to deter our adversaries. Further capability investments in strengthening our maritime dominance are also paying off and will continue to pay off in the years ahead. Over the next 10 years, we'll bring to life lethal, agile, and technologically advanced platforms like Columbia-class submarines, the backbone of our nation's nuclear deterrent, Constellation-class frigates, which will provide greater presence and lethality, and next-generation Marine and Navy aircraft, which will give us exceptional range and agility. Similarly, Virginia-class submarines, non-kinetic electronic warfare, and offensive cybersecurity will help us achieve maritime dominance through deception and counteract our competitors' purported advantages. Linking all of these new warfighting capabilities together will be a new naval operational architecture we are developing through Project Overmatch. Aggressive deployment of these game-changing capabilities and technologies are critical priorities for our naval forces and their contribution to the joint warfighting strategy. Our strategy for strengthening our maritime dominance also consists of deterring adversaries with agile, networked, survivable naval forces that can deliver long-range fires and unmatched lethality while neutralizing their perceived advantages. This audience understands better than most why such a clear strategy backed by substantial investment is necessary. However, our maritime dominance is not a foregone conclusion, and it can never be overestimated. For the first time since the Cold War, we have a strategic competitor with naval capabilities that rival our own. The PLA's Navy is indeed our pacing challenge. China is strong and getting stronger. China has 17 shipyards and now has the world's largest fleet with approximately 350 ships. With continued investments, it will have over 450 by the end of the decade. Perhaps even more concerning is Beijing's testing and eventual production of hypersonic weapons and advanced anti-access, anti-denial capabilities. China has signaled malign intentions behind these investments, threatening its democratic neighbors, particularly Taiwan. If Taiwan were to fall to Beijing's military aggression, America would not only lose our 8th largest trading partner, but the world could see China again exclusive control of the South China Sea. That is simply unacceptable. A strategy based on our ability to fight in a distributed manner and strike adversaries across all domains, at range, and to sustain lethal combat power in contested environments will perhaps prevent that outcome. Yet even the perfect strategy will fail if it does not have the best warfighters to implement it. Our success will depend on the warfighting skills and commitment of the sailors and the Marines that I am so proud to serve. As General George Patton once said, wars are fought with weapons, but they are won by men. I, of course, believe they are won today by both men and women. But do me a favor, please don't tell General McConville that the Secretary of the Navy just quoted an Army general. I'll never hear the end of it. Our second guiding principle then is empowering our people by fostering a culture of warfighting excellence. We must ensure we have a talented Navy Marine Corps team capable of winning any fight, empowered with the training and the tool it needs to succeed. And so far, we are making much progress. Morale is high in the Department of the Navy, and our people have a clear sense of mission. I'm not just saying this. I have the benefit of experience to see it and understand it. As one example, the USS Mustin's crew, who recently shadowed the Chinese carrier Liaoning in the South China Sea. While the Liaoning was engaged in training exercises, USS Mustin sailed within visual range of the carrier, well inside the perimeter Liaoning escorts intended to enforce. USS Mustin's crew proved a point. America's Navy will not back down just because China or any other competitor issues an implicit threat. Shadowing the Liaoning said more than Pentagon officials, including myself and senior brass, could say in 100 speeches. It is our responsibility to ensure that sailors and Marines throughout our force live by the same culture of warfighting excellence that imbued the crew of the USS Mustin. To be clear, we are making the investments necessary to uphold the strong culture of warfighting excellence. Investments in initiatives like Ready Relevant Learning, the Learning to Action Board, and Talent Management 2030 are producing more capable, more accountable sailors and Marines. Equally important is that we ensure sailors and Marines understand that character creates competence. A good leader is an empathetic one. If commanding officers berate instead of teach, we must teach them the correct approach. If talented individuals believe they cannot serve because of their race or their gender, then we must root out the malign forces that tell them that they are not welcome. Let me be clear, these are not political statements. They are part of a coherent strategy designed to attract the best talent and build the trust that's necessary amongst warfighters. That kind of force will undoubtedly deter our adversaries, who are often simply scripted in how to fight, and we see that today in Ukraine. Our sailors and Marines are people. They are indeed our most significant competitive advantage. In the coming budget cycle, we must double down on the investments that we have made in them. We must provide them with proper training and guidance throughout their time in uniform to help them unleash their full potential. Given our strategic threats, everyone on the Navy Marine Corps team, be they uniformed or civilian, must unleash their full potential. We cannot do that without our partners in industry. This brings me to our third guiding principle, strengthening our strategic partnerships. I will start with the Department of the Navy's partnership with industry. And let me be frank, we need more. I spent 17 years as a business owner serving the armed forces, so I understand how much we rely upon each and every one of you. We will not forget that the innovative platforms and technologies that are so essential to the joint warfighting concept would not exist without the private sector's involvement. Yet that is not enough. We need our partners to manage costs, fight requirements, creep, and deliver platforms on time and on budget. We also need our partners to think about the large-scale challenges that the Department of the Navy continues to face, and indeed the whole world is facing, and doing their part to tackle them. Ultimately, we need our industrial partners to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. We are committed to engaging with industry, understanding your own challenges, and making potential investments when we need to. But we also demand a higher return on that investment. We must always ensure we operate in the best interest of the men and women who protect us and with regards to the American taxpayers that support us. Given how much we demand of our people, we must provide them the best. In this global age, they are not just the best warfighters in the world. They are also some of the best effective diplomats in America's arsenal. They are essential to a core element of our deterrent strategy, namely the commitment to collectively defend. That commitment is strong, and it is one of the greatest competitive advantages that we have over both China and Russia. We have countless examples. Last year, our sailors worked alongside other navies in dozens of exercises, including Malabar with our Indo-Pacific allies and Steadfast Defender with our NATO partners. Given Russia's aggression in the Ukraine, I must also mention the USS Mount Whitney operating alongside Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Turkish navies and the Georgian Coast Guard in the Black Sea. Our Marines are equally a critical component of our maritime diplomatic strategy. They undertake joint operations every single day, like the embarked F-35B squadron aboard HMS Queen Elizabeth earlier this year. I am proud of the fact that, as Forbes put it, there are exactly 6 classes of warships all over the world that can launch and land F-35B stealth jump jets. In 2021, the Marine Corps operated on 5 of those. Deck hopping amongst our allies is not a dream. It is real, and it is necessary. That level of interoperability will deter and confuse China. It will also make China understand that the U.S. and its allies fight as one, giving us overwhelming numbers. That's a level of cooperation and military diplomacy that neither China nor Russia can ever hope to achieve. As Thomas Friedman wrote, China has no friends, only vassals. To paraphrase President Biden, the U.S. Navy Marine Corps team can own the finish line. Our people, our alliances, and our innovation are enormous competitive advantages. It is incumbent upon us, then, to adhere to a strategy that capitalizes on those advantages for maritime dominance, and it's not optional. Neither is it guaranteed. That is why we must remember that keeping a strong deterrent is a sacred responsibility. We must act as if lives depend on the decisions that we make, because they actually do. When we deter wars, we save lives. When we strengthen our maritime dominance, we save lives. When we foster a culture of warfighting excellence, we save lives. When we strengthen our partnerships and our alliances, we save lives. Let me close by thanking all of you for your support of our sailors and Marines as they protect our nation at sea. And to all who wear the uniform today, may God bless you, protect you, and your families. Thank you very much. Q&A time, Jim?
Yes, sir. Microphone's in the office. He's trying to tell me my mic's on. I'm sorry, sir. Remember, they did give me the pink one.
It's on.
Yes, sir. Well, while we get started, can I throw out the first one?
Sure.
Is there a correlation between where you need to invest in shipbuilding in terms of potentially maybe a 500-ish ship fleet with where the PLA and Navy is going in terms of expanding from 350 to 450?
Sure. I often get asked this question. No surprise. And I strongly believe that if we care about lethality and our ability to deter our aggressors, you've got to care about both capacity and capability. So it's a mix of the two. 500 ship number, as the CNO has stated, actually really derives from the 2018 NDAA, which basically provides for approximately 350 ships plus 150 unmanned vessels, unmanned platforms, basically. And perhaps it's not too far off the mark. I don't know what the exact number is, but the fact is that we need both capacity and capability in order to determine the lethality that we need to deter our aggressors. And that's going to change year to year and threat to threat, essentially. But we've got a lot of work to do to determine exactly what the right mix of manned vessels are and also the right mix of unmanned vessels.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Doug Brooks with the International Stability Operations Association. I love this turn to great power conflict, but the reality of great power conflicts in history are they are fought in small wars, which is why we have the Marine Small War Handbook from the 1930s, which is still, I think, somewhat relevant. Are we maintaining our ability to fight small wars? Are we losing this skills and capabilities that we've had for the past 20 years?
I'm sorry, the question was, are we losing our ability to fight small wars?
In the switch to great power conflicts, are we losing our ability to fight small wars?
No, I would argue we're not. In fact, I would argue that the United States military in general is more prepared today to address any conflict necessary to meet the challenge. I really do. When you take a look at, and I've come into this job now, I'm coming up on my 7th month, and I compare the amount of capability and the amount of active campaigning that our military forces have done over the course of the last 20 years since I served in uniform, it's truly impressive how far we've come. And I would argue that those troops are more ready today to meet any conflict, whether it's an engagement with an adversary or in response to a humanitarian crisis of any nature. I'd argue that we are better prepared today than we have been in a long, long time. And our troops are more ready. Congressman, good to see you.
Senator Bass, you too.
Hey, sir. Sam Legrone from USNI News. How are you today?
Yes, U.S. Navy.
Two quick Red Hill questions.
Sure.
Given the Secretary's guidance, Secretary Austin's guidance to shutter the facility within a year, and the recapitalization that's going to go into providing a sort of similar capability in the Pacific. Number one, we saw that y'all were just out there February 26th taking a tour of the facility. Did Indo-PACOM, did Admiral Aquilino sort of indicate that they can get by without the facility? And then the second one is, has OSD and Secretary Austin assured y'all that you could have the budget relief in order to build a replacement facility or get tankers and stuff like that? Because the timeline seems to be pretty short. Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your question. And let me first start off by saying that, you know, what occurred in Red Hill at the end of last year and back in May of last year actually was very unfortunate, a very unfortunate accident. And we should never have put our sailors, our service members, our soldiers, our airmen in that position. And it really is very unfortunate. And of course, I was confirmed secretary in August and went out there shortly after the November incident and put a stop to operations at Red Hill at that time, and also made clear that all options would be on the table in terms of the future Red Hill. And we've actually taken the time these past 90 days since then to reassess the strategic importance of the fuel depot and how we could actually use this situation to position us in a far stronger position moving forward as to the distribution of fuel in the Pacific in particular. And without question, the assessments and the analysis that's been done, it's been made clear that there are many other strategic choices that are far more strategic for us as a force, moving that fuel forward and distributing it both on land and at sea throughout the Pacific, than having it all in one place and being very vulnerable there in Oahu, apart from the fact that we have a responsibility to preserve the welfare, the safety of our own people, and as well as the environment in Hawaii as well too. Having a fuel farm, you know, lie just 100 feet above the aquifer that serves all of Oahu might have made sense perhaps during the days of World War II, but given the threats that we face today, it doesn't make sense. So I'm really thankful to the Secretary, to Admiral Aquilino, and to all of us on the entire team that worked together over these past 90 days to really look for other strategic advantages and opportunities to move the fuel out of there. Does that answer your question?
What about the cost in order to build new facilities or new tankers and stuff like that? I mean, that's going to be an additional unplanned cost for the department. Is that something that y'all have been talking about?
So I don't necessarily want to get into the very specific details of where we're going to put the fuel and how we're going to, where we're going to put it. But let me just simply say that we're not looking at building a lot of other facilities. There are already pre-existing facilities that exist throughout the Pacific that we could rely upon. Spent a lot of time just talking about the relationship between partners and allies, and we have the locations necessary to distribute that fuel effectively without building an enormous number of additional fuel farms, for example.
Sure. The CNO laid out that he was looking at 50 or 60 frigates within the force structure that he was proposing. Presently, the Constellation class is looking at 20 ships in the last official Navy plan. Is this 50 to 60 number, does that incorporate LCS, or are we looking at a prolonged build more in line with the Perry class with its 54 vessels in the class that we built in the 70s and 80s?
Well, the overall ship count does include the LCSs, but as far as the frigates goes, we want to build these initial 20 ships. And then I suggest that the future probably does hold for construction of additional frigates in the future as well, too, as we move on to other fit-ups as well. That's okay. Just ask the question. Don't worry about it. Well, one should never underestimate one's adversary, and perhaps the shortcomings that we've seen with regards to the Russian army as it invades Ukraine, that same disadvantage doesn't necessarily translate over to the Navy and their submarine force, for example. We know that they have continued to invest very strategically and wisely in their own submarine force, and their technology, approaches ours, and so one should never estimate that capability and the threat that capability presents to us. And in the lead up to this invasion of Ukraine, we've actually seen an increase in the operations of the Russian fleet as they crossed the line and invaded Ukraine. And so we've been watching that very, very carefully, learning a lot from it, and we'll certainly apply those lessons as we continue to advance our submarine and undersea capability in general. So, yeah, never underestimate their capability to cause damage. Other questions? Boy, I answered everybody's questions. That was easy.
Okay, Secretary, there's been a lot of discussion now that as the Navy submits its programmatics, that one of the things that you're doing is a range of ships. Like instead of a number, you use a range. The other comment that was made was that as you submit to the 500 ship or 460 ship Navy, it's what's in that.
So you want me to reveal the president's budget? Is that what you want me to do?
What I would ask is, yes, he does. I know that's shameless.
I know.
What I'm really asking is, as the programmatics go in, will they see greater clarity in terms of what you're building and state is?
Yeah. No, look, last year we did submit a range of ships in the shipbuilding plan, and although I won't reveal what we'll do this year, let me simply suggest that, I think there's very clear definition in what a country or a nation like ours needs in the next 10 years, for example, right? And it's important to provide that transparency and that definition, right? But as you go beyond 10 years from now, can you clearly indicate what the threats will be that our nation faces? And so I think it's important to have some decision space there to move in one direction or another. And this also becomes important when we take a look at the development of unmanned technology, right? And it's transformative in so many ways that we still don't clearly understand. But when you look at MQ-9, when you look at MQ-25, these are truly transformative technologies that are going to reshape how we fight wars and conflicts in the future. And so it really becomes difficult to predict that. So I think, as they did last year, it was a viable solution actually to have definition in the first 10 years. And then when you're looking beyond that, perhaps to have it a little more open to the possibilities that may exist as we test out these unmanned technologies and the concepts of operations that go along with them, right? Because that's also important. It's not just about building the platforms, but how do you integrate those platforms with our manned platforms as well, and the C2I that's sort of needed between those two. So I hope that at least satisfies your thirst for information.
And just in closing, sir, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
You had made it clear that the concept of divest invest is not something you want to take in a different direction. Could you want to build on that for the audience, particularly with respect to some of the older pieces of fleet that might be less capable and less?
Sure. I don't think it comes as any surprise to anyone in this room that, the choices that we have to make moving forward are sort of, in many ways, influenced by decisions that were made 20 years ago to invest in a certain class of platforms. So the reality of that is that, we have a responsibility in the Department of the Navy to make all of our platforms as capable as we possibly can. There's no question about that. And as a destroyer sailor myself, there's nothing more than I would love to be able to keep the Ticonderoga-class cruisers around for another 20 years, for example. But any sailor who's served on one of those ships, and I know that there's several of you out here right now, when I served on my cruiser, she was already 30 years old. And, you know, when you start diving into those fuel tanks, when you start diving into those bilges, and I walk those bilges, as I crawl through those bilges, you get to truly understand the challenge of having to repair ships of that age. And then to operate, you know, at the pace with which we've been operationally using these platforms as well too, the wear and tear is significant. And the safety of our people in the United States Navy always has to come first in times of peace, without question. And so it would be irresponsible to continue to operate some of those platforms today at great risk to personnel safety in the Navy. And then you might argue, well, can't we fix it? But if you try to repair those ships at a cost that far exceeds the investment to go buy something else that's new, why would you do that? You know? Now, I know some of you out there love to drive your cars to 20 years, right? And that's a great thing. My most recent car, I drove till it was 20 years old. But you know, you get to that point where every time you take it to the mechanic, you're dropping $1,000 down on that car, right? And it doesn't nearly do the sort of things that doesn't have all the fancy gadgets and gizmos that everybody loves, right? And a new toy. At some point, you gotta let it go. You just gotta let it go, and you gotta go buy that other new car. That makes most sense. So I'm sure a lot of you in this room can relate to that, right? So awesome. Well, I want to thank you for your dedication to our national security and for sharing with us in government all the great ideas that you do have, and I take that very seriously. I read a lot of your articles. I don't always agree with them, but I read a lot of your articles, and I definitely appreciate your contribution to our national security. So thank you. Thanks, Jim.